picture of carrying a burden on his shoulders. And he adopts it for so long that he no longer voluntarily can get out of it.
Okay. Could you tell me something about the limitations that you have in your dance and where you're feeling it in your body?
Well, most of the trouble is with alignment. When I stand sideways, my neck goes this way, and so I don't get a straight vertical feel. I can try to correct it from my normal posture. What I try to do is pull back my lower back and lengthen my neck so I feel a little more vertical. But as soon as I'm not concentrating on that, I lose it again.
What happens when you lose it? What do you feel happening in your body?
I sink into my pelvis. But I get this curve in my lower back and my neck. I feel like I'm moving across the floor this way.
Right.
That's an exaggeration.
The basic problem in practically all bodies is a shortening of the spine. And that shortening of the spine occurs by virtue of the lumbar spine, which consists of very heavy vertebrae, and which becomes displaced forward.
How's your breathing now?
I feel like I'm breathing deeper from the left side of my diaphragm. I feel like my diaphragm's here on my left side and higher on my right side.
There are many imposed breathing patterns, imposed by many schools of thinking about bodies. Our own school believes absolutely sincerely and one-pointedly that one must not impose a breathing pattern, that as the ribs, the spine, the pelvis, and so forth become normally related, what we consider a normal breathing pattern emerges and can be seen. Most people think of bodies as being collections of muscles. Rolfists don't see it that way. All muscles are wrapped in a tissue which is named fascia. And for those of you who don't understand this word fascia, let me suggest that you think of an orange that you cut across the equator, and you see it and then divided into many segments. Now the divisions between the segments correspond to the divisions in animal tissue that we call fascia. This is an interesting tissue that is largely collagen. And collagen is important to us because of its very special characteristics. Now, in the body, every muscle and every organ is enwrapped in fascia. And finally, this whole collection of wrapped fascial organs and so forth is wrapped in what amounts to a shopping bag, an external bag that is called the superficial fascia. And these various fascial planes and fascial bags hold that body together. But all of them are connected one to another. This is a model of two muscles designed to show how muscles work and how muscles fail to work. Many muscles cross one another, others lie adjacent to each other. When a myofascial structure is injured, and this can happen in an accident, or it can happen through such a thing as a dose of flu that gets in an area where there are muscles. But at any rate, whenever a myofascial structure is injured, it secretes various semi-fluid materials which should really improve the movement of muscles, and does really while it is semi-fluid. But then it dries on, and the semi-fluid material becomes a glue. It will be a glue between the fascia, the envelope of the fascia, and the envelope of the fascia of this muscle. And that glue prevents it from really working independently. And so when this muscle is pulled, it is impeded by the glue that is sticking those two fascial envelopes together. And so when we call on this muscle for movement, what we really get is this muscle impeded by that muscle. And so there is not free movement. And so every attempt at moving that muscle requires more energy because you have to move both this muscle and that muscle. As I said before, the collagen tissue is a very special tissue. It's a very special kind of a complicated protein tissue. And it is special in the sense that by the application of energy, you can change its length and its resilience. Now, as the Rolf applies energy at this point perhaps and this point, at any rate in the neighborhood of the place where the tissue is built up into something of a hard little knot, as he applies energy there, the glue seems to dissolve. And all of a sudden, he feels under his fingers that one muscle is moving on the other muscle freely, and that these two muscles can begin to operate in their respective directions, in the direction called for by their design.
Feel it moving there?
Yeah. Feels like a little piece of real thin wax paper sliding.
Mm-hmm. That's a fascia.
We use our fingers, our knuckles, our elbows, and so forth, and this primitive pressure is also the application of energy. It is a pressure, it is a very basic energy, such as all bodies respond to.
I think just a little bit in this first session, perhaps I did gain a little bit what I was after, and that is alignment. My shoulders seem to be a little more released. My chest, the pectoral area, seems to be more open.
The parts that specifically in Eric that have changed have been his arms, has been his shoulders, has been the fashion in which his neck sits on those shoulders and his head comes up instead of being tilted back there, has been basically the change in the groin structure. There is a weakness in this groin structure here, a weakness that says to the experienced person that Eric is a man who gets tired very easily, tired on his feet. And as this man is a dancer, this is a pretty serious situation. And here you see that lumbar spine has come back. Refer it to the arm structure. It has come back, and in coming back, it has more nearly approached the vertical, which is what we are trying to find. Eric, I'm sure, is particularly aware of the change in his neck structure. The neck has come back. He's no longer carrying his head in front of him. And his head is, after all, a matter of maybe 12 to 15 pounds that he is literally carrying in front of him the entire day, except when he's lying flat on his back. He is having to carry that head. It is not just balanced above his spine. And here he is carrying less of it. Eric, in his picture of After One, shows an improvement, an approach toward the vertical. But he also shows that there is a very great deal of work that needs to be done still. And of course, after all, we claim that we don't want to take on people who are not going to have at least 10 hours because we want to establish an essential verticality. And unless they're willing to do this, we're not really very anxious to have them. Nevertheless, we always feel that first hour is something very special. It establishes in the mind of the person in whom we work, Eric, in this case, the possibility of change. Basically, we feel ourselves not therapists. We feel that we are teachers. And my expression of this is that we are not therapists under any circumstances. That it is the gravitational field that is the therapist. What we do is to prepare the body to receive the support from the gravitational field, which gives the greater sense of well-being that you have heard expressed among these people whom you have been questioning.
And he touched certain spots on my body at one point. He felt that it was just too tender and he couldn't work there, and I couldn't take it working there. And it wasn't a physical pain, it was an emotional pain. And the third Rolfing, he went to that spot again. And the most unusual thing I felt at that time is that I had an odor of sulfur that just filled the air as he touched part of me. And I had a flashback of sulfur packs being put on my back from an illness as I was a child. And it released a lot of emotional pain that I had gone through when I was 10 and freed me from it.
Serious traumatic episodes also leave their mark. And later in life, a person goes to a psychotherapist of some sort, expecting to get those dug out. But actually, those very serious traumatic episodes are anchored literally in the flesh of the body. And until the flesh of the body is freed so that it can move appropriately to the pattern, the traumatic episode cannot really be erased from that body, forgotten. It's not possible. For example, I remember a young man who, after not 10 but 20 hours of work in Rolfing, was still showing such a peculiar pattern around his chin and throat. And I started working on him, and he burst into tears, and he begged me to stop. He could smell the water, he could taste the water. And actually what he was tasting and smelling was the reliving of an episode in which, as a 3 or 4-year-old child, he had literally drowned, been fished out of the lake, given respiratory assistance and so forth, and eventually brought around again. But the child actually had apparently died at that point. And now, he's now 40 years old instead of 4 years old, and he's reliving this episode and tasting the water as it's pumped out from those lungs.
From the very first session, I felt like a sudden calmness had come all over me. I could think deeply, my thought was like penetrating, and as I got off session after session, I could experience a day-to-day growth, a day-to-day release of tension, a day-to-day release of anger, things that I've never been able to do before. It's, the feeling is like, well, now that child which was stifling inside of you has been allowed to grow. And since that day, I've been maturing in a way that I could hardly understand. It's like I always felt like a child, and now I'm feeling like a man.
To me, personality is not a mental thing, but to me, personality expresses a two-sided coin, on one side is the physical and one side is the mental. And a serious change in either one will most certainly result in a serious change in the other.
Well, I think I'm the only one in the group whose children have been done. The youngest one of the boy, he was far more emotional than any of the children. And after he had a particularly traumatic session in Rolfing, the next day he came home and he was joyful and happy and free and running, and it was like everything had been released all at the same time.
Always people are innovators by virtue of the fact that they have come up against a problem to which there is no answer in the accepted field, in the conventional field, and so they set about trying to find out what is the answer, what can give them a help with their problem. I had a child who had certain problems that I couldn't find help for in the accepted field. And so I started looking around trying to find out what were the elements in this child's problem which could be changed. Because always you have to change your premise in order to get a different conclusion.